Hello, welcome back to Future of Film Summit, and I hope you are enjoying day 2 so far. So, we are now have a very exciting session lined up, and we are going to be embarking on hybrid immersive experiences with 5G and emerging technology. And I'm very lucky to be joined with two experts in the emergence of this technology: Joshua Ness, Senior Manager at Verizon 5G Labs, and Sarah Galarski, Content Partnership and Business Development, also at Verizon. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure.
I know it's an early start there in New York City, so we especially appreciate you taking the time. And I'd love to start here with just, if I could come to you, Josh, just give us an overview, please, of the technologies we're talking about here. So we're talking about 5G and emerging technology, but I mean, I guess first maybe in terms of 5G, where are we currently in the rollout of that? When is it going to be, widely available? And more importantly, did 5G cause COVID?
Oh yeah, the question on everyone's mind. 5G. I appreciate you asking that, getting the tough ones out of the way first, Alex. 5G did not cause coronavirus. You can take that to the bank. That would assume that radio waves can create living organisms, which they can't. And so no. Please feel safe when people are talking about 5G. Please understand that it is safe and it undergoes it adheres to the strictest of regulations set by governing bodies. But yeah, 5G is the question is like, what is it? When is it going to be available? What's it going to do? How is it going to impact me? Don't I already have 5G? These are all questions that we get a lot at 5G Labs. So to lay the groundwork for what we're talking about is going to be super helpful as we dive into this conversation. 5G stands for the 5th generation of wireless connectivity. If you think about what those generations were, we didn't really call them Gs back in the day. It was just we had a brick phone, and that was 1G. We could make voice calls. Hooray! Then there was the introduction of texting, and that really wasn't called 2G. It was just all of a sudden you had a phone that could text. 3G was the beginnings of data transfer, which wasn't saying a whole lot. Essentially, you had email, you had calendar, you could take a photo of yourself and send it to your boo. Like that's pretty much what you could do. There were some pretty grainy experiences. Even browsing the web was a more of a truncated experience because the networks knew that 3G didn't have a whole lot of data capacity because it was still in its infancy, and so they mandated that the devices on their networks, BlackBerry and Palm especially, were not data heavy. So they facilitated experiences like active email and calendaring, but mostly the web experience wasn't really there. And so when the iPhone was released, that kind of changed everything. And that started allowing for more immersive types of experiences because it had a very fast processor, and it had a full web browser capability, but it was still functioning on that 3G network. And then when 4G was released around the end of 2010, that's when you started seeing this explosion of new innovations, of these new applications, and in a lot of ways, a new way of life, a new way that we think about how we live our lives today. The fact that I could be broadcasting to you on my cell phone right now, 10 years ago would have been unthinkable, would have been crazy. And so I'm not, by the way, I'm using a computer on my Wi-Fi, but I could be on my cell phone. And so as 5G is coming onto the market, and in many countries, it's already here. in the United States, 5G is starting to become ubiquitous in certain bands, and I won't go too deep into the airwaves, but there is a low band 5G, which refers to the spectrum of the airwaves that it uses to communicate with your phone. But the 5G backend systems are all the same, and as those airwaves become more accessible in the low, the mid, and the high band, what we call millimeter wave, you're going to start seeing a whole new set of immersive experiences that are going to become available for consumers. Now, that's 5G. One of the beauties of 5G is that it's not just faster internet. It is much more responsive internet. We're talking about single-digit millisecond latencies. We're talking about the ability for many more devices to be connected to a 5G radio than is previously possible on 4G. If you remember the last time you were at something like a Taylor Swift concert and you were trying to post to your Instagram stories, it doesn't really work because your phone kind of caps out on the data feed. And it's not necessarily because of the network, it's because there's so many people trying to connect into the same radios that are there in the arena. 5G solves that problem. And so it's going to allow for, and I think we're going to get into this a little bit later, the ability for hybrid experiences, the ability to experience virtual storytelling combined with a live environment. That can take a lot of different shapes, and I think we're definitely going to talk about that. And so those are some of the benefits of 5G, but it also unlocks other types of supporting and emerging technologies. Things like multi-access edge computing, the idea that you can take cloud resources and bring them very, very close to the user, close to the client device that in many cases looks like this, and that will evolve. And I'm sure we'll talk about that too. But that allows for compute to be offloaded from the device, and as well as GPU rendering, and allows that to be happening in the network itself and then delivered back to the device in a seamless real-time manner. And that unlocks a whole new level of possibilities that have huge implications for the audience here today. When we talk about storytelling, when we talk about different ways to bring immersive experiences to consumers, the ability to have very, very large throughput capability, right, high bandwidth, as well as a distributed compute and render capability, which can also be used to host some AI that can do a lot regarding things like post-production and processing. It really is going to allow for a completely new generation of film experiences, and that's why we're here today.
Wow, that's a really helpful overview, and I think as you say, it's understanding. I mean, I'm understanding too for the first time. I think really just that it means a lot more than just having fast internet all the time. There's all of these different aspects to it, which can benefit collaboration. That seems like a huge part of it in terms of storytelling, such a collaborative process, and being able to make that more real time seems to be a big part of it. And then I guess on the other side is what you're saying is the experience for the audience, the consumer. There's this opportunity to become much more, I guess, a much more direct connection between the storytellers and the audience and the audience amongst themselves. It seems very powerful. Well, there's lots of things I'd love to come back to on there. Thinking, what is a hybrid experience? What does that look like? What are devices going to look like? How is 5G going to shape the way we, the hardware? But I mean, maybe Sarah, I could jump to you. Tell me a little bit about your perspective in this and your role and where what you're excited about in terms of how 5G is going to change content and content creation.
Yeah. So I'm part of the next generation and entertainment team within Verizon, and our real goal is not just to do interesting marketing partnerships with Verizon and a variety of companies, but to help tell the story of why 5G is important to those companies and why it's important to their users. So we'll partner with a lot of gaming companies. Gaming is huge for this space. The low latency of 5G enables all sorts of new gaming experiences around interactivity, multiplayer, better rendering, increased capacity in terms of multiplayer, thousands, millions of people playing something at once together in one space. And then we're also looking especially at AR and VR, and even audio and things like that. But in the AR and VR space, AR right now, what most people see as AR, as in 2016 when they turned on Pokemon Go for the first time, or Snapchat in the traditional sense, where it's just an overlay and it's fairly two-dimensional and it doesn't have depth. All that is really just scratching the surface of what AR can be and what 5G can bring to the table there. When you bring in 5G and when you bring in edge compute, AR basically can take over your entire world. It can allow you to, say you go to a movie, you go see the next whatever Marvel film or something like that. That movie experience doesn't have to end just when you leave the theater. There can be an entire world that you get to immerse yourself in after the fact, through AR that interacts with the space that you're in, through games, through storytelling. Maybe even before you get to the theater, you can have a perspective on the different characters. You can play around with the space. There's just so much that could be unlocked within the film space around those interactive experiences. So maybe not necessarily you're going to go to a movie and pull out your phone and be really annoying and that hopefully will not be happening anytime soon, but the before experience, maybe it's in the trailers or while you're waiting to go into the theater or afterwards, that you can unlock all of these new experiences that help drive you into that world and bring more excitement in a way that you couldn't before.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's as creators, that's just a very exciting idea, right? That you can come out, you can break out of the constraints of the I mean, John Gator was just talking now. He talks about film as a sculpture, as like a form which is fixed, and and it's beautiful, and it can be beautiful, but to sort of break out of that as well and have these more malleable and immersive environments. Do you think a lot of it is then about location specific things, like going to the theatre, coming out of the theatre, interacting there? Is it about out of the house, like the Taylor Swift example?
Yeah, I mean, the real changes that I think we're going to see are going to be in the out-of-home experiences. So if you have a fantastic Verizon home internet experience, 5G is going to be great, but it's not going to be a real game changer for you on the home entertainment front. But when you leave your house, that jump in 4G to 5G, that's where the huge amount of difference is going to be in mobile, in interactive experiences, in thin devices like the VR headsets. No longer have to be a big brick that all of that compute power can be offloaded into the edge. All that kind of stuff where you're out of the home, where you're untethered, where you don't have to be constrained by your Wi-Fi. That's where all this really exciting change is going to be, because right now we're on the 4G network. You're getting, you can have 1,000 people on one of these nodes. On the 5G network, you can have 1 million people. You can have, instead of 80 millisecond latencies on your phone, you can have 5 millisecond latencies. And that's going to be an entirely different experience. And so when we partner with these companies, we don't necessarily know what the future is going to unlock. We didn't know when 4G came out that YouTube and Twitch and TikTok and all these interactive social media experiences would be unlocked by 4G. With 5G, all we can do is try to partner with companies and get ahead of the game and show them, here are all these new capabilities that we're going to present to you. Now we need you and the storytellers and the filmmakers to go out and say, oh, now I can do all those things that I couldn't do before. Now I can go, create something crazy that I didn't even have as an option in a previous life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just looking at some of the comments coming through here. Matt Fellows says virtual plus live environment equals a possibility of live cinema. And I suppose that's something, we could definitely come about through this, this more of a real-time power that this offers. And just a note to everyone watching, please do send through questions for Josh and Sarah, and we'll do our best to get them to them. So, yeah, I think that's incredibly exciting. Josh, can I come back to you just to ask about what this might mean in terms of the creative process, and and also maybe a little bit more about edge computing, which sounds, and I'm going to this is going to be a terrible bastardization of what it actually is, but it sounds like a super powered cloud in a way. So you're not just sending stuff up to the cloud. It's like having a massive GPU or something which you can always access. Is that a terrible summary of what it means?
No, not at all. That's actually fairly accurate. I think we might go rewrite our product specs to include that. No, when you think about the cloud, everything that you're using on your phone is interacting with the cloud. When you think about everything from Instagram to YouTube, to even if you are uploading your daily bicycle ride or your run into something like Strava, like you're using cloud resources there. None of that is contained on your device. Even more frequently, you're finding that photos aren't even contained on your device, and people are using Apple and Google to keep track of their photos and to free up space on their devices. And so when you are interacting with applications on your mobile device, you're using cloud almost 100% of the time. And what that means is that data is stored somewhere, and it's wherever that company has cloud storage or cloud virtual machines, and usually those are hosted by people like Google, like Microsoft with Azure, like Amazon with AWS. There are some smaller players, groups like DigitalOcean that do a great job. Lots of different cloud opportunities and options. And what those are, they are servers that have CPU and GPU capabilities that are located somewhere else. That's really all that means. With Edge, we're saying that we can take some of those capabilities on a smaller scale than a big giant server farm located in the Nevada desert, and we can bring it very, very close to the user. And because that particular distributed cloud server is servicing a smaller population, that means it doesn't have to be as big as a big giant server farm. That means that the resources that are embedded in there, CPU, GPU, artificial intelligence, things like that, they can be very, very powerful, servicing a small subset of the population that's accessing them. And what that does is it unlocks some of the things that we were talking about. And Sarah mentioned that out of the home is going to be impacted, especially when your devices are connecting natively into the network. 5G actually also, it will become a home product. We'll be able to have 5G home with something called fixed wireless access, where we can just beam 5G directly into a home or a business and create those 5G capabilities also in the home. And so what that means is that you're going to be able to see creators that are able to create new types of storytelling that can be consumed by individuals in this hybrid environment. And when I think of hybrid, I think about this idea that we're dealing with a pandemic right now, and the cinema industry has been severely impacted. We all know that, and creators have had to come up with new ways for consumers, new business models, and new ways for consumers to consume their content in the home. And I don't necessarily think that's going away anytime soon. Even when we put this whole coronavirus thing behind us, I think that the hybrid model is going to be here to stay for a while. I do within my function at Verizon, as well as some side projects, I manage events. Most of the time, they were live events coming into 2020. Now they're all virtual. They're not just going to suddenly go back to being live 100% of the time. There's going to have to be this consideration for hybrid models for conferences, for networking, and I think for entertainment as well. And so I think you're going to start seeing entertainers in the form of concerts, as well as sporting events, as well as cinematic experiences that are going to have to service. They're going to have to be structured in such a way that they service live attendees as well as attendees that just aren't ready for that yet. And for whatever reason, I think we're going to have a good half a decade or so of needing to create this hybrid experiential model. Now, the issue then is that's also not going to go away. That's going to become the new normal. And creators are going to have to start thinking really creatively about how they are storytelling and how they are having this hybrid combination of leading someone through a story, but creating opportunities for them to interact with their audiences, whether that's through augmented or virtual reality that uses the power of 5G and edge compute to create seamless natural language processing, so that these characters can interact with the user, or sometimes where the actors themselves can be interacting in a real-time way, whether that's through something like volumetric or motion capture, that using the power of VR and AR, like Sarah was talking about, allows them to change and morph and move around, and create all new types of stories. And 5G and edge computing are going to play a huge role in that.
Well, I'm busily taking notes for Future Film 2021 and thinking about how we pivot into that. It's exciting. I love the idea of that you can take people on a journey, as a storyteller, effectively, but in and out of a digital space and a physical space. That's very exciting. We had a great quote, a great comment from Eli Stonberg, who says hybrid events are here to stay. Certainly agreement there in the audience about this. We have a really interesting question here from Joel Forsell. Do you think it would be possible for virtual locations to be stored in the cloud or edge, ready to be browsed and explored in real time by filmmakers using VR headsets? Basically, online location scouting available 24/7.
I think that's already really happening with virtual production. So I'm sure that's been a big topic of conversation in the summit these few days. But with virtual production, I mean, how easy is it when you're using a game engine to create these massive worlds that are easily interactable, that are easily adjustable, that, even outside of the production itself, once you've created the Empire State Building, you don't have to create the Empire State Building 100 more times. It's already in a game engine. You can go plop it into a different movie or a commercial or whatever it is that you want to do. Or maybe, like I was mentioning before, that after the movie experience, you used Unreal to develop the sets for whatever movie it is you happen to be making. You instantly have the backgrounds for the game, for the experience that you would have afterwards. You would have all of the assets, all of the models that you could go pretty quickly put into another experience, and the whole thing would be seamless. It would be connected because it would be the exact same model and experience. And I mean, there is just endless opportunity with what you can do there when you're using game engines to create all these experiences and to create these worlds, and all that stuff needs to live somewhere. And with the cloud and with edge compute, all that can be interacted with in a virtual way, so that you don't necessarily you don't need 100 people on set at one time to be interacting with the space. you can have your director or whoever it is off in another country. And then, especially right now, while we're thinking about different ways of producing movies, where you can't have everybody all together at once. If you have the director off in another country or in a different time zone or something like that, and the movie's being made in LA, that person can say, "Oh, you just shift that a little to the right or whatever," and they can see it all happening in real time. They can process all the materials in real time and make adjustments, and that's really revolutionary. And I think it's really been brought on by the needs of the pandemic, but it's something that's going to stick with us for a long time after.
Yeah, and I think 5G allows for new types of two types of supporting technologies that I think are going to be very complementary to what Sarah was just talking about. One of them is things like drone scouting, and the way that drones that do like reconnaissance drones, the way that they function is actually not too dissimilar from the way that filmmaking happens, and I'll explain what I mean. When you send out a drone, whether it's for surveying purposes or first responder purposes, that drone is collecting video data, right? Preferably in something like 4K. Eventually, that'll move to 8K, and it is pulling in data from its cameras, but it's storing it on a hard drive. And in order for anyone to view and process that information, that drone has to go back to where it came from. That hard drive has to be extracted from the drone, and then it has to be processed and viewed. Whether that's an AI that's doing it, or whether it's a person that's doing it, that's the way that you get footage off of drones, and that's not too dissimilar from filming. When you're filming on location, that 4K or that 8K film, those shots are contained on a hard drive, and then that hard drive has to be physically taken to a processing facility, where then it is downloaded and then analyzed and cleaned up, and then it's ready for editing. And any filmmaker knows that takes forever. And so the capability of 5G to impact both of those processes is going to be what I think, I don't know if revolutionary is the right term, but it certainly is going to cut down on a lot of time and money. And so we're going to be able to do things like location scouting using drones that are able to send back data in real time. And like Sarah was talking about, if a location scout wants to explore something else that isn't in a cached environment like the original question was talking about, then that scout can go ahead and do that in real time and move that drone around so that it can take a look at everything that's happening. And so I think you'll start to see drone location scouting as a service that uses 5G to go out and scout locations in remote places where the location scout doesn't necessarily need to be right there. And then with filming, I think we're going to start to see the ability for captured film to be sent into, using 5G, sent into the edge, cleaned up with an AI, and then sent to the processing facility for the editor to begin editing in real time. And so the editor could be able to tell the director or whoever's capturing the film to capture new types of shots, new types of film in order to complete the story, right? And so I think both of these have very dramatic implications for the industry, both on a production level and on a consumption and engagement level.
And what's exciting is the reduction in that cost and the time that it takes to do these things really democratizes the type of people and the number of people who can get involved in film and filmmaking and really high fidelity Star Wars type movies, because it's so much cheaper. It's so much easier for someone to do, as long as you have a huge warehouse with a big screen and a fantastic internet connection, and hopefully a 5G Verizon ultra wideband internet connection. You can create a movie that looks like one of these, Avatar type movies that have taken years and years, and you can do it quickly. You can have more people working on it. You can have smaller budgets. You can have studios funding these more variety of things, and that more variety should bring in different types of storytellers, diverse diverse types of stories being surfaced to the public, because not everything has to make up for that massive budget that you needed at the outset in order to create these movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great trailer, Sarah, you're giving for our next couple of talks. Has Dalal's coming up next, and he's been talking about how he's used virtual production to create incredibly impressive, spectacular films during the pandemic as well. So it really, I'm completely, agree that there's a massive democratization piece here, and I think, what's interesting about that, if we can just get into that a little bit, is great. Okay, so assuming that we do get to the position where you do get these more these new voices coming through, telling stories which look incredible and have that appeal, then it's like about discovery, right? It comes back to discovery and distribution, and I suppose, yeah, there's also a part there for 5G to play in that role in terms of building that relationship with audiences. What do you think?
I mean, recommendation engines are something that have been talked about for a long time, and they're improving. And when, as we're seeing now with the proliferation of streaming services that are available, that are even in some cases taking the place of the movie studios and are becoming where those, like the first run spot for those really high quality movies, discovery is going to be difficult. And so that's going to be on all of these streaming platforms and content creators to find new and interesting ways to surface this content to audiences. And either it's on those platforms through things like recommendation engines and AI, and understanding better who that person is and what kinds of things they like to watch, while also balancing that you can't just keep showing people the same stuff all the time. You have to, people want to see things that are new as well. So that's going to be, there's definitely a lot of work to be done in that space, but it also means that those companies are going to have to do more to attract different audiences. So when we like theaters to attract audiences, maybe there's just more fun that's happening at the theater. Streaming services, I don't know what that looks like. There's definitely going to be changes on the price side, on the bundling side, more on the economics, I think, in order to bring you to that specific streaming service, because there's just so much good stuff coming out right now. And how do you get all of the great stuff in front of all the people who want to see it? And there's not an easy answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice problem to have in a way, I guess. But to have all of that
definitely the golden
content
of entertainment right now, because there's just so much that's so great and that you want to spend your time on, especially while you're stuck at home interacting with your family.
Yeah, and I think it's going to have an impact on how the stories are written as well. You talk about connecting with the audience, and I think the ability to like Sarah said, democratize the filmmaking process will allow. Have an ancillary effect of being able to gather information and gather data from audiences in a much more real-time way. And that can influence everything from the direction of a show, of a series, to potentially even altering the direction of a film, of a single consumption type of a piece of content. And I think that's where things like script writing is going to become is going to need to change and need to evolve with the advent of with the ubiquitousness of 5G and edge compute technologies. And it's not something that people would normally think of. Your head doesn't go to, oh, if there's a faster internet connection, I'm going to have to rethink the way that I write my scripts. You absolutely will, because for one, script writing for hybrid. For immersive, means that you need to take into account that it's not just that you're not going to be able to do Birdman style scene shifts and changes, and blend those things together. Because if your audience is in an immersive format, they are in a 360 virtual world, and you will need to start incorporating very, very smooth shifts that take into account the 360 nature, and not necessarily knowing exactly where your audience is looking when you do decide to change a scene. But you also may need to start including haptic feedback to make sure that the audience stays engaged, and in some instances doesn't get sick. And so that script writing is going to have to be altered for those immersive formats. But then also, if you're taking real-time data, you're going to have to be able to shift on the fly to make sure that you're accounting for audience preferences, and doubling down in areas where they are very interested, and then maybe trimming back in areas where they're not. And so I think there's going to be a whole new arena of people who are not only building those virtual worlds in computer programs, but also for people who are writing the content in the first place, to account for the hybrid nature of film consumption and engagement.
Josh, that's also a really interesting point around script writing, because when you have these immersive hybrid experiences where, say, it's a narrative VR film like the Gnomes and Goblins VR movie that I know has been in production since 2015, that is finally coming out, and it's going to be like 5 hours of both interactive but narrative director driven movie experience with characters and collections and gamification and all that other kind of stuff. The volume of script writing is going to just explode, because instead of just one story you have to write, now you all of a sudden have to write 50 stories or something, depending on the different path that the audience happens to be taking. And so it just becomes an entirely different way of thinking about stories, thinking about writing, thinking it's more like computer programming or coding, where you have to think about every single possibility that something could take, and anticipate it and come up with a solution or a next step for that piece of the story. And it's very different from what we've been seeing before. And I don't think that there has been something that's come out yet that really shows off what that looks like. Obviously, Gnomes and Goblins is not out yet. We can't see it, but it should be coming soon. So I'm really excited to see that one. But there's just so much opportunity here to create new kinds of storytelling.
So what was I missed the name of the 5 hour VR piece.
Yes, it's Jon Favreau, who has been a revolutionary in all of these spaces. I mean, with The Lion King and VR production, with Mandalorian and virtual production, and then he was the first person to really take on immersive narrative VR feature length film storytelling with this movie called Gnomes and Goblins, with the VR production studio. I think it's called Weaver, and it's something that's been in production for a long time, I think, because it's been very difficult to figure out how do you take a story that you have a direction that the director wants you to go in while still allowing for the audience to have choice.
As I was mentioning earlier, we had a great session on interactive storytelling yesterday, and later today there is a breakout session with Stornoway, who have created a interactive story screenwriting tool, which starts to answer some of these questions. But it does. Do you think we are entering an era where film and the idea of games and the technology of games is really converging?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, movies, games, it's all storytelling. I feel like there's been a lot that film has learned from the gaming industry, which they couldn't do before the technology had developed to make these games look like movie sets themselves. And before it was able like to have the processing power to create a movie in the way that you're doing a game. It used to be that, Lara Croft, everything was a little polygon, a little angular. If you used a movie to create or if you used a game engine to create a movie, it was going to end up looking like a game. But now these games are such high fidelity and they're so beautiful and they're so immersive and they're just these massive worlds with so much opportunity that movies can look to them and say like, oh, wait a second. All of a sudden I can just do that and film my movie in there and it'll feel like I'm filming it on a set somewhere. Like, how amazing is that? So there's definitely a lot of learnings both on the development of the set and the experience and the environment side, but also on the storytelling side.
Yeah, and I think for any folks who are in the audience that have done things like game design or are gamers themselves, they'll know that as the gaming industry has evolved, we're starting to see much more attention paid to the cinematic cutaways, both in terms of their fidelity as well as in terms of their ability to drive the story forward. Going as far back as, I mean, one of my first experiences with this was the Halo franchise, and the fact that the cinematic direction influenced my interest in playing the game, because I was able to then follow the storyline and feel like I was actually influencing the direction of how this story was evolving. And then you start to see that even more through all of these epic games, whether it's things like Halo or Red Dead Redemption or I mean, the list goes on. And I think that these games have already started to bring on people with cinematic backgrounds in order to help create these audience. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it engagement, but it certainly is used to get the audience more engaged in the activity that they are undertaking. And so I think we're already starting to see this hybrid experience between games and cinema. And I think that's only going to grow and increase. And you'll start to see this pendulum move around because in those particular situations, it's the cinema that's driving the gamification. But I think we're about to start seeing the gamification driving the cinema. And I think I'd be really interested to see in the next couple of years how the members of the audience are starting to play with that spectrum and move along and merging these two types of technologies and engagement models.
It's exciting for sure, and I think game have been pretty good in terms of drawing in that vernacular of filmmaking and the aesthetics of filmmaking into it. And now I think it's time for film perhaps to start drawing into more of that vernacular from games. But I think it already is. Guys, this has been amazing. I could keep on talking about this stuff forever. You clearly are deep thinkers about this and right at that apex of technology and storytelling, and I'm now super excited about the possibilities of 5G and what that can do for us as storytellers and audiences. So look, thank you so much again for joining us at a horrible hour in East Coast. But Josh and Sarah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you to the Future of Film team. This was really exciting.